In this video, I'm going to offer advice on automotive photography, from cars to motorcycles, lighting considerations, angles, polarization, space requirements, assistance, and more.
Thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Use coupon code CARL to get a 10% discount.
For those of you who know me, you'll know that my main work is a mixture of commercial product photography, some beauty and fashion work, and teaching photography on carltayloreducation.com. But you may not know that for many years I had a keen interest in motorbikes. In fact, I owned several great bikes over the years, but unfortunately that avenue of pleasure was closed by my wife when the kids came along. It was bikes or my diving, so I chose diving as it was something that I do a lot of, as well as enjoying my underwater filming. But as a result of that love of bikes, I always enjoyed shooting them. They were technically very challenging to shoot, and if done well, the results could be stunning. As a product photographer, the technical aspects and principles of lighting for automotive is actually very similar to the products I usually shoot. You often have a mixture of gloss and matte surfaces and difficult reflective curves. It's all just on a bigger scale. Although many new car images are undertaken using CGI, there is still a demand for real photography, especially for classic cars. Until recently though, it'd been quite some time since I worked on a proper car shoot. So I thought I'd give it another go, and I decided to produce a series of new tutorials for my education website that covered how I'd go about it on a couple of different sports cars and at a few different angles. But here, I thought I'd give you some pointers to consider if you wanted to give it a try. Number 1, focal length. This is actually more important than you might first realise. Focal length will dictate shooting distance and angle of view, which affects the perspective. That means that the appearance of what you see is very different as you move further away from the subject. The first thing to establish is what focal length is going to deliver the shot you want. Are you going to shoot low, mid, or high up? And how will the distance away from the vehicle affect the perceived shape of what you are viewing? For example, when you view a car from a few meters away, certain aspects of the car, such as seeing both headlights, might not be possible. But as you move further away, the second headlight or other features of the vehicle come into view. Also, the weight of the vehicle is another consideration. And by weight, I mean how squat or heavy it feels, or how agile it might look in a photograph. If shooting from too far away with a longer focal length lens, then the vehicle could look quite chunky. If shooting too close with a wider angle lens, then you can make the vehicle look quite bulbous. Number 2, angle of view. The angle of view can be considered as two things: your chosen shooting position as well as the actual angle of view in degrees of the chosen focal length. If using a lens with a wider field of view, then you will also have more background, which means more background to control with lighting, or if on location, more scenery to consider. When it comes to shooting position, then your angle of view is not only the field of view, but also the way you want to view the car or bike. Are you going to shoot from the standard height, or from low, or from a much higher angle? The decisions for this should be based on the aesthetics that you want to describe about the vehicle. For example, with this gorgeous Mercedes GT, I also wanted to show the lovely curves of the rear of the car, but the rest of the car too. So for this shot, I opted for a high position on a ladder and a slightly shorter focal length, allowing me to see those curves. Making your decision on your angle of view is personal. You need to get a feeling for the vehicle. Think about what is its best lines or attributes and how you're going to show those off. Sometimes a low perspective will make things look more powerful and menacing, and other times a standard viewpoint will be more acceptable. Number 3, lighting. In car and motorcycle shots, you want to make the car or bike feel luxurious and desirable. To get this aesthetic, we need to create gradients of light across the panels combined with more homogeneous patches of light to create a gloss look with areas of harder pockets of light to define important elements of the design with higher contrast and structure. To create smooth gradients, I use my own custom-made floating ceiling panel. But it doesn't always have to be this expensive or complicated. I've shot cars in a warehouse with lots of makeshift polyboards to give a similar result. To create hard pockets of light, highlighting necessary parts, I use tightly controlled beams such as honeycomb grids or Fresnels. We have another video on our channel on how we constructed our floating ceiling panel that you might find useful. Number 4, mixing light and multiple lighting. Many car photographers prefer continuous tungsten lighting, but I prefer daylight balance flash. Some parts of a car may require so many lights that you don't have enough lights in your arsenal. In this case, you can do one of two things. You can mix continuous lights such as LED or HMI with your studio flash, or you can use the same light multiple times. The great thing about a vehicle is it doesn't easily move when it's switched off. So as long as your camera is well locked down, then you can use the technique of lighting areas of a vehicle separately with the same light and then layer those shots together in post-production, which means that you could actually light a whole car with just one light if you had the time or inclination. Other techniques involve painting the car with continuous light during a long exposure and mixing it with flash in the same shot. This allows you to illuminate panels on a car that you couldn't illuminate in a conventional way. Number 5, shooting headlights and tail lights separately to the main shot. Some shots look better with the car lights on and some look better with the lights off. If you shoot the car lights at the end of your shoot, you can experiment with different exposure times to record the headlights or the tail lights at different levels of exposure without affecting the depth of field. Of course, you need a darkened studio to do this, or do your shoot when it's dark outside. By shooting them separately, you can decide later if you want to add them in or not when doing your post-production. To have the car lights on, sometimes you need to turn the engine on. If you're working in a studio, only do this briefly to avoid carbon monoxide building up in your studio and also making the air turbid. Number 6, using polarizers. Polarizing filters are extremely effective at removing unwanted reflections from certain areas. During a shoot, I will examine the effects of a polarizer and usually shoot a few images of the vehicle whilst turning the polarizer to different positions. This can then provide me with clear windshields or side windows or alternative looks to the paintwork. Again, like the headlight images, this can be combined in the final shot in post-production if necessary. Number 7. Depth of field. Vehicles can be several meters long, which means you'll need to keep an eye on your depth of field. If you need to get the whole car sharp, then focusing on the front of the car and closing your aperture is going to create a wasted depth of field in front of the car where there is just empty space. Once you have decided on and fixed your viewing position, test your depth of field before you go too far with your lighting. Consider moving your focus point further down the vehicle so that the depth of field is further back and maximizes hyperfocal distance, ensuring that the whole vehicle can be sharp in one shot. Of course, the best solution would be a technical camera or a tilt and shift lens, allowing you to use Scheimpflug theory and shift the depth of field plane to a more suitable angle. But if you're using a conventional lens, depth of field should still be achievable at f11 or f16. But test it and expect that you will want the front to be sharper than the back of the car if that's your only choice. Number 8, reflectors. In automotive studio photography, we're often using walls, ceilings, and large panels as big reflectors. But don't forget, you can also use the floor too. Here, I bounce light off the floor to provide the exact lighting needed in the bodywork. Large mirrors or sheets of glossy metal can also be useful for creating light in specific places. This is essential for lighting upwards, as it would be virtually impossible without a glass floor to get a light under the floor pointing up at the car. Number 9, space requirements. Cars and bikes are relatively big compared to my normal product shots, so it's obvious you're going to need more room. My studio is 12 meters wide by 24 meters long, but the shooting area I used was about 8 meters by 12 meters of the cove, and then several meters back from the vehicle. My previous studio was on the first floor, so getting vehicles in wasn't an option. But I've also shot cars in borrowed warehouse spaces. And don't forget that some great car shots can be also done outdoors. Number 10, assistants. Finally, I'd say assistants are essential, and a couple of them make life even easier. There's lots of testing, the need to move big panels, tweaking and moving lights while you need to look through camera. If you don't have an assistant, then maybe you can find a couple of car nuts that would like to help you try your own shoot. If you'd like to learn more about automotive photography or watch these shoots in full, then head over to Carl Taylor Education and check out our automotive section where you'll find motorbike shoots as well as sports cars. If that seems a little daunting at the moment, well, we even have a racing bicycle shoot covered. For more inspiration, fellow photographer and car specialist Tim Wallace also has some great inspiration on his website, and he runs the occasional car seminar too. Well, I hope you found this useful, and thanks very much for watching.
This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Carl to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.